Welcome back to the Public Sector Pulse series, where we explore ways to strengthen critical infrastructure and to give you actual practical steps to do it. Today, I'm joined by Ben Scott, our Public Sector Systems Engineer here at Fortinet. Ben will share practical guidance for small and rural utilities beginning their cybersecurity journey, maybe going further into it, but ultimately focusing on how to work with partners, adopt scalable solutions, and overcome the common challenges like limited budgets, resources, and so forth. Let's go ahead and get started. Ben, thanks for joining today. I want to start off with a few questions here. Knowing your background, knowing you do a lot of work currently in the public sector when it comes to securing utilities, especially water, wastewater, which we've been talking a lot about lately, I want to get your thoughts on a few key questions here. So let's start with your experience. When you're working in a utility environment, what's usually the first thing that you look for or at from a security perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. So the first thing that I look at is visibility and asset inventory across both our IT and OT systems. You need to know what assets are on your network, what protocols are in use, and how data flows between zones. Most small utilities don't have a clear picture of what devices, protocols, or connections even exist across IT and OT. Without that, you're operationally blind. You can't protect what you can't see. So once we've built that baseline, the next thing that we look for is segmentation and zoning. Breaking networks into security zones to contain risk. So really, it's making sure that a compromise in one area doesn't spread across the entire operation. And that combination of knowing what you have and structuring it logically becomes the foundation for safety and resilience. And it doesn't need to be complex. And we'll go into that in a few minutes as well.
Okay, so you mentioned a few key areas there, and I want to go a little bit deeper into that. So what are some of the common challenges that you face? You mentioned staffing, visibility. We want to talk about funding as well. Give us your view on some of those common challenges.
Yeah, and there are really a few challenges that I see across the board. There are some fundamental ones that you brought up. So staffing, expertise, funding and compliance are definitely an aspect that comes up quite a bit. You know, every dollar has to be justified to both regulators and boards. From the staffing perspective, you know, most rural utilities don't have dedicated cybersecurity teams. You know, security is often a bolted-on component to someone else's job. The same individual who's mowing the grass in the afternoon is likely the person that will be managing the security solution in the evening. So that means that whatever tools they have to use must be intuitive and consolidated and not 5 different dashboards. So that's a common challenge that I see in the industry as a whole for water and wastewater. The compliance and governance component, you know, we mentioned that every dollar has to be justified to both the regulators and the boards, but leaders also want to know if their investment maps directly to standards, you know, like NIST CSF and CIS and IEC 62443. So they really need solutions that are already architected with compliance in mind, because that's something that for them is a very complicated and often daunting task to tackle. So solutions that can help really report that compliance posture out of the box and help reduce that burden are going to be essential. The cultural gap as well when it comes to, you know, really the organizations as a whole, you know, the gap between IT and OT teams. And you have to be both technical and also organizationally aligned to overcome those challenges. So, you know, at the end of the day, they aren't just technical. They're about people, processes, and technology. But at the end of the day, they're proving compliance, proving, you know, their secure posture, and really at the end of the day, protecting the critical flow of water or cleanup of water for the citizens that they are, you know, working for.
So Ben, you said, I think one thing that really put a light bulb in my head, which you said proving. And I think many times, and you started off saying that security tends to be a bolt-on. We have to justify it and how we spend and why we want to do it and why it looks a little bit more flashy. And really many times when when I've talked with customers or, technology folks that have to speak up into the business world, they've got to make that proving ground. They have to show the value that's there. So let's talk about some quick wins, right? So are there any quick wins that you usually recommend? And let's think about things that can make really big impact that also do not break the budget.
Yeah, the first win in any organization that I've worked with is getting visibility into what's on your network. We talked about this before, but most utilities don't have that clear picture of their assets, what equipment's out there, what versions they're running, if they're vulnerable or how they're connected, or even who has the ability to connect to those devices.
Right.
So an asset inventory and visibility into asset communications is absolutely essential. And it's a great first step to make the biggest impact, because from there, they can build on segmenting IT and OT. They can build on tightening up remote access and implementing things like secure remote access and multi-factor authentication. And they can really ensure that at the end of the day, they're protecting their legacy systems, since a lot of PLCs and HMIs can't be patched, right? So being able to provide them a way to visualize their environment, a way to visualize the assets, the communications between the assets, and understand how these devices are vulnerable is really the foundation to a strong program. And when we look at how we align that and how that fits in with budget, these align directly to NIST CSF and the CPGs or cross-sector performance goals for water sector specifically. So the point isn't just compliance though, right? It's about building confidence and a security culture step by step. And once they have that visibility as that first step, every other improvement becomes a lot easier and more effective. So at the end of the day, these actions very early on build momentum quickly and help demonstrate to the boards and the regulators that these folks answer to provide quick wins to check off, these high value items, in these two areas, and show measurable improvements and tangible results, all without breaking the budget.
Ben, we probably sound like broken records, but visibility is one that we talk a lot about. But I think you said a couple key things that really put it into that category of the big impact without the huge budget. And we talk about visibility. We know we're on a journey. Whatever sector someone is in when it comes to protecting things, we're always on a journey. And I think you really hit home the point of visibility has to be the key, because it's not just us on that journey. We've got to bring other folks along. And providing visibility gives folks that roadmap that we talk about many times to make sure they can see where we're going, and that there is a steady state that we are going to head to, right? This is not from a money aspect, it's not an endless bucket of money you're going to drop dollars into, but then also from a resource perspective, we know that there's a tangible, maybe not end, but there's a tangible steady state that we can get to that gives us the capability to stay where we're at, need to be, or grow. So that leads me to my next question here of scalability. How can utilities make sure that their early efforts are scalable as they grow?
So scalability is definitely one of the more interesting topics, in that a lot of organizations will start off by looking for products, and specifically point products, to fill a gap or solve a problem. And that mindset is not a flawed mindset at all. It's just a component of the overall journey. So really, when we look at how can we tackle this, how can we solve this and make sure that the solutions we're implementing today scale as we go through this maturity journey. And the first place I always start in this conversation is that scalability comes from thinking platform, not point product. Using solutions that integrate threat intelligence, segmentation, monitoring across IT and OT, and that asset visibility. That way, the organization can start, with a firewall or endpoint control, but expand into compliance dashboards, advanced monitoring, and automation as needs grows. Documenting policies and procedures very early on is also very important. So having those workflows and understanding how, in the event of an incident, how can we as an organization tackle that, and have we practiced? So really evolving this maturity playbook, so to speak, as your program matures to tackle those individual challenges of creating a programmatic approach to OT cybersecurity for their water facility, tackling how to manage, unified reporting, compliance metrics, and how to provide that to auditors or provide that to assessors. How to really check the box when it comes to ensuring that today's investment won't become tomorrow's bottleneck, because that's often what happens when they go that point product route. They create bottlenecks in their overall journey that they then have to go back and re-explore and ask for additional funding. So to reiterate, thinking platform and not product is going to be essential very early on, and thinking use case driven and what problems are we solving for is always going to be essential.
Awesome. So, knowing your depth of and breadth of experience here, folks, we didn't even talk about all the good things that Ben does in the state of Ohio. He's a cyber reservist member, as well as many other things he gives back into the cybersecurity community. Ben has a lot of wisdom, and this is one question I actually am really interested and want to hear from is, what would you say, Ben, to a utility leader who feels completely overwhelmed about where to begin? And what would be your talk track to kind of help talk them off the ledge?
Yeah, it's start small, but start today. And the key of this is don't try to boil the ocean. So cybersecurity for OT and industrial control systems isn't about perfection. It's about progress. It's about showing those incremental steps towards a more resilient state. At the end of the day, that their key goals are safety and ensuring that the water that they're either providing as a service or cleaning, right, in wastewater, their goal is to ensure that the safety and reliability and resilience of those systems and trust. So when we're looking at how to take that, step, that first step into this journey, take one or two simple but high impact steps. Begin with visibility and asset inventory, shore up your secure remote access, implement MFA, and knowing what you have and who can connect to it is half the battle. You'll gain confidence, you'll gain that momentum to make it much easier to tackle those next steps. And when you're discussing that with your boards or your regulators, reframe the investment. It isn't about cybersecurity. At the end of the day, it's about safety, reliability, and trust. Protecting those critical services means protecting people, community, and reputations. And the other component to this that I think is even more important is that they're not alone on this journey. They don't have to reinvent the wheel either. There's a community of partners, industry groups, and government programs built to support utilities. Leverage them, utilize them, take full advantage of those resources out there and the people that are there to assist. Cybersecurity is a journey. It's not a destination by any stretch. But if you build step by step and align to proven controls like NIST CSF or CIS, you'll not only reduce risk, you'll gain resilience and confidence along the way. And finally, this probably doesn't need to be said, but choose solutions that are secure by design, interoperable with your existing systems, and industry certified. That way you're not just putting out fires, you're building towards a long-term strategy that supports both cybersecurity and digital transformation.
Ben,
and those would really be the foundations of that.
Awesome. Ben, that's a great overview. And as we've talked here, I think I have some new axioms to add. We always talk about in cybersecurity, it's a team sport. And we've talked about cybersecurity as a journey. I think we have a new one to add on here, that cybersecurity is about safety, resilience, and ultimately trust that we bring to our organizations. I think it's a great one we can add to, and I think you coined that very well. So thank you. So Ben, you've shared some great insights for utilities just starting out in their cybersecurity journey. And I think you've made it even clear how these small steps taken with the right strategy and with the right partners can make a meaningful impact on resilience. So anybody who's listening here, to learn more about how Fortinet supports utilities and critical infrastructure, please visit Fortinet.com. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more expert conversations.